Hey everyone, this is Jono from Veracity with another video in my video series. This one, a getting started video on how does data get into an LRS. When we are onboarding some clients that are new to LRSs and the Experience API or xAPI technology, we often have to kind of go through what an xAPI environment looks like and just generally how things work. So you know if there's an issue or something that needs to be addressed, where it needs to be addressed with what system or platform or kind of where in the pipeline. So this session is going to be real high level and really just describing in presentation style how we get data into a learning record store. So in this case, we're calling this my Veracity LRS. Really, it could be any LRS because for the most part, everything we're going to talk about today applies generally to any xAPI conformant learning record store. So often we hear folks that say, hey, I've got this learning management system and I want to get some data out of my learning management system into the LRS so that I can look at analytics or build reports or dashboards, etc. Not just LMSs, websites. I've got a website. I want to pull out some data about how users are experiencing content on my website. Could be anonymous users. It may not be. But again, how do I get data from my website into the LRS? Could be an e-learning course. I've got this course and I want to send data from the course to the LRS. Could be a native mobile application, iOS or Android app. And how do I get the data from my app over to the LRS? One of the misconceptions is that the LRS is an active technology that is somehow monitoring what is happening in your application or your course or your website or your LMS, or insert your tool here. But that's not the case. What really happens is the thing that you want to track data about, like your LMS or your course, is called a learning record provider in xAPI language. And it sends data over to the LRS. So, that is, I think, one of the key concepts here. Let me bring out my highlighter. So the LRS, stuff happens here and it gets sent this direction. The communication initiates on this side, not over here on the LRS side. Let's just dig in a little bit on how it works. So let's say you've got your system or your content or app or tool, it doesn't really matter. And some educationally relevant event occurs while the user is experiencing the system. Real simple one to think about is a user is in some e-learning course. Maybe they complete an exam and get a score on the exam, pass, fail, that kind of thing. So they get to that point in the course where something happens. I will note that it doesn't have to happen when the event happens. It could be cached for later, but to make it simple, some event happens. Then that system, so still not the LRS. LRS notice is just kind of sitting over here. In the system associated with that event that happened, xAPI data, xAPI about the user's interaction is created. So essentially the system creates a record of the event using what is called an xAPI statement. Again, if you're familiar with xAPI, you know there's other things beyond xAPI statements, but again, just to keep this simple, an xAPI statement is created. Again, this is still all over here in the content. Something happened that resulted in an xAPI statement to be created, and then that data is sent from my system content app or tool over to the LRS. And my system content app or tool initiates that request. And that is done using the xAPI statement resource. That is a thing that exists. Let me grab my highlighter again. Statement resource is something exposed right here by Veracity. Has to be in any conformant LRS. A content that has the appropriate authentication knows that that resource or endpoint exists and it's able to put data through it. what happens next is the LRS will respond and say, hey, that worked, or hey, your formatted data wasn't right, so I can't accept it, or you did something else, your authentication, your credentials were no good. So the LRS will respond to the content to make the content aware of whether the data storage actually worked. And then right along with that, maybe, actually before or while this was happening, the data is actually stored in the LRS where we can make future use of it. But the important fact here is the LRP, the system, the content, or the app. That's where the event happens. That's where the data is turned into an xAPI data format. And then that system initiates the push of a request over to the LRS to store it. Once the data is in the LRS, you can do all kinds of stuff with it. You can access the data via the xAPI, and that's standardized. And in many cases, LRSs provide graphs and reports and other data analytic features once that stuff is stored. So in a nutshell, that is how data gets into an LRS. There are small variations on many of the things that we talked about here today, but in general, in the simplest case, that's how things work. I think what we're going to start here early this year is part of this video series where we go into very fundamental aspects of the xAPI and how it works, kind of like this video, some practical, some slideware. So if this is of interest to you, keep an eye out. All right, we're going to go ahead and call it there for today. If you like this video, click the thumbs up and/or subscribe. Thanks for watching and have a good one.